The debate between renewables and nuclear energy is heating up. Just a few days ago, the CSIRO released its costings showing that nuclear would be twice as expensive as green energy. So is it still a viable option? A parliamentary inquiry this week is looking into the case for nuclear power generation in Australia. And today, a nuclear law expert is preparing to give evidence in Sydney about what a potential legal and regulatory framework would need to look like for a transition to take place. That expert is Helen Cook, and she joins me on the program now. Thanks so much for your time, Helen. So one of the obstacles spoken about is that we don't have a nuclear industry and therefore a framework. So getting this set up, we'd have to be starting from absolute scratch. Is that your view?
No, that's not my view at all. In fact, that's fundamentally incorrect. Australia has been a nuclear nation since the 1950s, and we're a very good nuclear community member. We have signed up to all of the necessary treaties and conventions that a country needs to have a nuclear program, and that's a nuclear energy program. We have existing national laws in the key areas of nuclear non-proliferation, nuclear security, and nuclear safety, and we have existing agencies that oversee the implementation of these laws. So as compared to other countries that are starting nuclear energy programs, Australia is actually in an excellent position when it comes to its legal and regulatory framework.
How long would it take to establish this?
So here's where I think I want to be quite specific and call out the comments that Claire Savage, the energy regulator, has made on this topic, where she said that it would take 8 to 10 years just to get the framework in place. I think that is a huge overestimation. As I said, we already have the fundamentals in this country, and what we would need to do is extend or expand upon the regulatory basis that we already have. We are not putting it in place from scratch by any means. And if you look at the way that our laws are set up, APANSA, that's our safety regulator, is actually required by its own law to look to best international practice when it sets up its regulatory regime. And it does that by drawing upon the International Atomic Energy Agency's safety standards. And it actually implements them into the requirements or the guidance that APANSA sets to regulate our research reactor. Now, if you actually look at and compare the safety standards for research reactors and power reactors, you'll see that actually the difference between the two is not enormous. So we would be expanding upon what we already have, certainly not creating it from scratch. And in my professional opinion, we can do that quite quickly. I think APANSA can be ready to receive a construction licence application for a nuclear power plant within 3 years.
Okay, so that is just receiving the approval essentially to get construction underway. Is it outside of your area of expertise for me to ask you how long then it would take to construct?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, good.
There's a lot of international data available on this, and there's international averages about 6. There's international averages that say 8. So let's say somewhere in there is the construction period, and that's from first nuclear safety concrete pour to electrons on the grid. Okay.
The reality of this and the reality of our energy system over the last 20 years has meant that this has been a political plaything. Is nuclear really hard to get up without some level of bipartisanship, do you think?
Look, I think that it has become a huge political issue in this country. I'm not necessarily convinced that that reflects what the majority of Australians actually feel about nuclear energy. I think the polling tells us that there is actually some baked in anti-nuclear sentiment, there's some baked in pro-nuclear sentiment, and then you have the majority of Australians actually self-declaring that they would like more information on this topic. They would like to understand nuclear energy. They would like to understand why so many countries in the rest of the world either have nuclear energy or are moving towards it. So I think with a little bit of information, the Australian people should be able to judge for themselves what the best mix for Australia would look like and whether it would include nuclear. But I do think that is going to require some leadership from our parliamentarians to ensure that accurate information about all energy generation sources is put to the Australian people. But there is a political issue. There's an ideological entrenchment that we need to deal with in this country, and I really hope that the inquiry and the debates that we're hearing around nuclear energy today will go some way to getting information to the Australian people.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks so much for your time. Great to talk to you.
Thanks, Laura.